Hi, and welcome to the stuff you should think about. I'm your host, G, and today's episode is going to be about local versus organic. When people debate local versus organic, they often imagine two rival philosophies battling for the moral high ground in the produce aisle. But the truth, as is usually the case when science meets culture, is far more nuanced. To understand the difference, we have to zoom out, widen the frame, and look at food not just as something we eat, but as the end point of a vast interconnected system shaped by biology, chemistry, economics, and the physics of energy itself. Let's start with the basics. Organic refers to how food is grown. It's about the methods. No synthetic pesticides, no artificial fertilizers, no genetically engineered seeds. It's an attempt to cultivate crops using practices that mimic natural ecosystems. Local, on the other hand, refers to where food is grown, usually within a certain radius of where it's sold. It's about proximity, not method. So, right away, we see something interesting. These two labels aren't opposites. They're not even measuring the same thing. It's about process. The other is about distance. And yet, in the public imagination, they become competing symbols of what it means to eat responsibly. To understand why, we have to zoom out again, this time into the realm of energy, because every piece of food you eat carries with it an invisible history of energy outputs. Sunlight captured by plants, fuel burned by tractors, electricity used for refrigerators, gasoline consumed by trucks transporting produce across continents. When people choose local food, they're often trying to minimize that energy footprint. They're trying to reduce the number of miles and therefore the amount of fossil fuel between the farm and the plate. But here's the cosmic twist: distance alone doesn't tell the whole story. A tomato grown 20 miles away in a heated greenhouse in winter may require far more energy than a tomato grown 1,500 miles away in a naturally warm climate. In other words, local doesn't automatically mean lower impact. The universe doesn't care about your zip code, it cares about physics, about the energy required to produce and transport the food. Now let's turn to organic. Organic farming avoids synthetic chemicals, which sounds simple enough, but the chemistry behind those decisions is anything but simple. Synthetic pesticides are not inherently more dangerous than natural ones. Some natural pesticides are extremely potent, some synthetic ones are remarkably safe. The distinction between natural and artificial is a human invention. The molecules themselves don't carry labels. What organic farming does emphasize is soil health, biodiversity, and ecological balance. These are scientifically meaningful goals. Healthy soils store carbon. Diverse ecosystems resist pests naturally. But organic farming also tends to require more land to produce the same amount of food. And on a planet with 8 billion people, land is not an infinite resource. So, which is better, local or organic? That's like asking whether a telescope or a microscope is better. It depends on what you're trying to see. Local food supports regional economies and can reduce transportation emissions, but only if the produce methods are energy efficient. Organic food reduces synthetic chemical use and promotes ecological resilience. but may require more land and sometimes more labor. The real question isn't which label is superior, it's what problem are we trying to solve? If the goal is to reduce carbon emissions, then energy efficiency matters more than distance. If the goal is to support biodiversity, organic practices may help. If the goal is to strengthen community food systems, local agriculture plays a crucial role. And if the goal is simply to eat the freshest possible produce, local often wins because time is the enemy of flavor. But let's zoom out one last time. Beyond labels, beyond marketing, beyond the binary choices we create for ourselves. Because the story of food is the story of humanity. It's the story of how a species made of stardust learned to cultivate the earth, to harness energy, to feed itself across continents and climates. Local and organic are not opposing ideologies. They're two different attempts to answer the same question. How do we feed ourselves sustainably on a changing planet? And maybe the most Tyson-esque conclusion is this: the universe doesn't hand out moral points for choosing one label over another. What it does reward, through the laws of physics, biology, and ecology, is systems that work, systems that conserve energy, protect resources, and adapt to change. Whether those systems are local, organic, both, or neither is less important than whether they're grounded in evidence, not assumptions. In the end, the smartest choice isn't a label, it's understanding the science behind the label and recognizing that the path to a sustainable future is as complex, interconnected, and awe inspiring as the cosmos itself.